Okay, welcome back. In the last video, we got up to the point of having created a flag on a plane, but it doesn't animate and it's very flat. And so now we're going to talk about how to do all that animation stuff along with sort of best practices. So let's get started. Well, first thing I don't like about it is I think the light's a little overpowerful. Notice the flag does look pretty good though. You can see all the seams and everything. It's not bad, but it's also not waving or anything, right? I think our light power is probably a little too much. I'm just going to hit escape on the keyboard. That'll bring us back to our view here. I'm going to click on our light with a mouse button click. Now our light is selected. And here I'm just going to go move up in the corner here to this light source. And these are some of the features of the light that we have selected. Right now I have an energy of 1. If I just sort of click in the space and drag it down, it'll sort of just knock out some of that energy and dim it down a little bit. There we go. So now let's go back to the camera view. I'm going to actually click on the camera with a right click again. And now I'm going to hit render again. And it should look a little better. Yeah, it's not as blown out. Still looks a little misty, but that's okay. So I can use my mouse to scroll in and out of that and really have a look at what I've done. So far, so good, right? We've created this image. We've dragged it into the view. We've positioned it. I can rotate around it with a 4 and a 6. To kind of see what's going on. I've got the hero shot where I'm aiming up at this. I only have one light on it right now, but that's probably okay, right? And so the next question is, well, what if I'm going to use there's a new Blender engine called Cycles Render. And what Cycles Render does is it does like this really amazing kind of determination of lighting. And by that I mean normally in Blender, most of the shadows are pretty harsh. And where there is no light directly on an item, the Blender render engine will just sort of make all the shadows or dark sides black. That's not great, right? And so what people used to do is take like a movie that they'd built in Blender, and then they'd take it out to a third-party rendering tool that would do all sort of amazing ray tracing and other things. Well, now there's a Cycles render engine. It's super fast, and it does a really good job. The only trouble is you can't use these textured images with it. If I render this, for example, it's just going to render this sort of textureless flag now, which will look no different. And you can see the render is very different because it kind of goes through with this little boxy thing and sort of calculates things in multiple passes, section by section. But there's no texture to it. So the question is, how do we get a texture into this flag in a meaningful way so that we can use the Cycles render engine? Well, ends up it's a lot easier than one would think. So I'm going to hit escape to undo this. There we go. We're back to it. So now this time I'm going to click on the flag, and we need to sort of add some of these textures. So what I first want to do is I want to go over here to where the textures, the material might be. We have that US flag, but it's meaningless right now because we were on the Blender render engine, but now we really want to live in Cycles. So what I'm going to do for that is I have to create a new texture. I'm going to take the old one and basically kill it. Okay. With this new material, I'm going to create a new texture, a new material to go on that texture. And then I'm going to alter this to like blue. Okay, so now if I were to render this, it's gonna work. Well, we should see it renders sort of this blue texture where the map was. Well, that's okay, but how do we actually get the map in there? Well, this is where both of these tricks kind of work together. One, we want to get the map in there. We want the map to size correctly. By loading it as sort of a image to a plane, we get the plane the right size, but now we're going to use something else in Blender called nodes to actually get this working correctly for us. So the first thing I want to do is, this is again what we were just looking at. I'm going to kind of hide this menu here. But now over here I want to load a different view called nodes. So here's the node editor, and notice that we've already got 2 nodes in here, right? So I have the material output, which is the actual object. Then we got this diffuse thing. This is it's got a name that's escaping me at the moment. Diffuse material, like surface material. But in the color, it has this little yellow orb, which means it could accept an image as well as other kinds of nodes that deal with color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say add. I'm going to go to texture and just say an image texture. So here I have an image texture, and I'm going to connect the color here by dragging it to that. Now you think this would get real complicated. Notice the color went away from all the other scenes. But if I just hit open, I'm going to go back to where I saved that original image, which is out here in project, US flag. Again, I got to hit open up here. And now we have our flag again. This time through this new modern technique called nodes. And what that does is that is not ignored by the cycles engine. So if I go back here and say render that, now we should get this kind of render, but via cycles, which again incorporates light in a very powerful way. So we can let this go ahead and render out. I'm not going to bother right now to let it render out. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to hurry up a bit by escaping out of this. Because the next things we want to do is we want to get that waving flag, right? I mean, that's clearly what we want to do. But to do that, we know that we're going to have to animate that flag. So there's a bunch of stuff we need to do and think about first. So the first thing I want to think about is I'm going to grab this window over here. We want to think about how long of an animation do we want for time? Well, let's imagine we actually want to animate a flag both in terms of to get a single cell shot out of it for like that image we were working on before, this one here, like this is that flag. How do we get it to wave like that? Well, that's where Blender's going to come in, but it's got to render quite a ways before it gets to that point. So the way we do that is, well, right now there is sort of a timeline. By default, it's 250 frames long. And if I look over here, it says that if we were to animate this, if we were going to make an animation out of this, which it won't do anything right now, if I just say animate it, it'll just sit there. Then it's going to render at 24 frames a second for 250 frames. So let's go ahead and most of the video is around either 2997 or 30. I'm going to just say flat 30. Let's work with 30 frames a second. So at 30 frames a second, 5 seconds is 250 frames, right? So 3 seconds would be what? 3 seconds is 90 frames. So if you rounded it out to 100, let's imagine that we have a little lead time, then we got to go about 90 seconds and then some like cooldown time after that we don't care about if we're going to animate it, And so again, you got to let animations sometimes build up, especially if it's going to wave. Like imagine the wind taking off and hitting a dangling flag. It's got to kind of like fill with breeze, right? And then at some point you have to snap a photo of it with a camera. Well, that's what we have to do, which leads us to the next point. How do we handle the breeze? Well, before we do that, let's talk about the actual flag itself. So this is on a plane. If I go into edit mode, which is right here, edit mode, there's a couple of ways into edit mode too. You can hit tab when you've got the flag selected with a right mouse click. Notice the blue border. So I'm going to hit tab and go into edit mode. What I want to do is I want to kind of scroll down here on the left and grab Subdivide. So I'm going to hit Subdivide, and that immediately cuts it in two slices, sort of one subdivision in along the X and then along the Y. So we have like 4 pieces. Well, to animate this flag, I need lots of pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and do 10 subdivisions, which is literally the max, as you can see there, of the Subdivide. But here's the hint. I'm going to click off of that. I'm going to go ahead, like click the camera or something. I don't know if I really have to do this or not, but then I'm going to hit Subdivide again. Notice it's dicing it even more. So I'm just going to do 2 more. So now I've got lots of subdivisions. That should mean that where those divisions come together, they should be able to animate. You can see up here all these subdivisions. They should be able to animate this. Well, there's a couple things we have to do before we then animate. Is we have to go in here and we have to say, well, how do we get it to animate? To animate, we got to add a property to this. And it's a physics property. So with a flag selected, first I'm going to go back to object mode by hitting tab. So this should change back for us, object mode. And then up here with the flag still selected with the right mouse button click, I'm going to hit this little thing. And this is our physics tab. Here I can say, well, I want to deal with cloth. So I'm going to get a cloth physics out of this. Now I'm going to run through a lot of things that matter in a hurry, just so you can kind of understand how this works. So cloth collision, the first thing you want to care about is when this animates, if I were to say animate it right now. And the way you do that is you hit Option or Alt A. So I'm going to do that just so you can see it. It's going to drop, which means, oh, physics is working, right? It's dropping. Hitting escape a couple times will send it back to the start of the animation. Okay, so physics is applied. But what we want to do is we want to pin it. So think that most flags are like pinned in the top and bottom. So to do that, we need like a special set of vertices to pin. And we don't have any sets of vertices. So the way we do that, which is very simple, is we're going to go back into edit mode with a flag selected with a tab, click. And now I'm going to zoom in with my mouse wheel. Holding down shift in the center button, I can kind of drag the view a little bit. Shift in the center mouse wheel. Now I'm going to go down here and select this little edge selection tool. I'm going to hit A on the keyboard so it selects everything and nothing. Okay, that's nothing selected. Now if I right mouse click right here, you'll notice it turns that little edge blue. I'm going to hold shift and right mouse click the one below it. So now both of these are actually selected. It's hard to see that, but I'm going to select two more at the bottom. So these, now I have 4 selected, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom, just on that outside edge where it would be like tied to a rope or to a pole or something. With that selected, I'm going to go over here. You'll notice a tool called Data. I think this is where I mean to be. Yep. And then the vertex groups. This is where we can create a new vertex group. So I'm going to just hit plus. And I'm going to immediately rename this. I'm going to just call it pin vertices for the flag. I don't know if I'm spelling vertices right there. How about we'll just simplify that, verts. How's that? And then I want to now assign the selection that I've made, these two and these two down here. So I'm going to hit assign. Okay, now once you've done that, I can deselect. Notice that there's no selection, and I can reselect again with that selected up here. And that just helps me confirm, yep, those two are blue, these two down here are blue. If I zoom in real close, hold shift, use the middle mouse button and drag, you can see, yeah, that's blue. And then that's blue. Okay, so we have what we want. We have selected a set of vertices. So this is what we're going to use to pin this flag. So with that having been done, I'm going to get out of edit mode with the tab. Now I'm going to go back to the physics tab. And down here I'm going to select pin. And now in here you can see those verts. So if I select that, that means that this will pin. Like they won't move, basically. So again, I'm going to hit Alt or Option A, and now it's going to act like a flag that's been pinned. But notice right here, it's really messed up because it's kind of colliding with itself and crossing through itself. So we don't want that. I want to go here where it says Cloth Collision, and I want to say Self Collision. Now you can increase the quality and the distance to make this perfect, but the key is I'm going to hit Escape. Now what if I hit Option A again or Alt A again? It should work, and the flag should not, it should crumple into itself, but it shouldn't like fall through itself. You can look up here, we're getting a pretty good animation, it's not bad. So, and then this is gonna animate all the way through, and that's cool. Well, you know, so technically we could pick a moment of that droop. I mean, that looks like a flag hanging from a pole, right? That's really not bad at all. I'm gonna go back to 1 here on the keyboard to get it centered the way I want it. And then when this is done, it can play through faster. What it's doing right now is just kind of loading up the cache for that cloth into memory of your computer. So if you don't have a lot of memory, you could also have it render to disk. That's one of the options. But now it just plays really fast. So I'm not doing disk cache. It'll just keep playing till I hit escape. So, I mean, it looks pretty good. Okay, but that's not what we want to have happen. What we really want to have happen is we want it to like be flowing in the breeze, right? So to do that, I'm going to put the cursor out here with a left mouse click. Then I'm going to go to 3 and be sure it's in the right spot. Yep, it's dead center there. That's where I want it. So back to 1. And then from here, I want to add something. So as long as I'm back in object mode, be out of edit mode, which with it, you can hit tab to move in and out of edit and object. So in object mode, I'm going to hit a Shift A. And from here, I'm going to go ahead and add a force field. And that force field will be wind. So now we have wind, and it's aiming up. If I zoom in real close, you can see it's got these little rings that kind of go sideways. And it's aiming straight up. So I'm going to hit R for rotate. And now I'm going to hold control down, and it's going to move in blocks. So if you're on a Mac, it's still control, remember, it's not anything else. And now we're aiming straight at the flag. I'm going to click with the left mouse button to lock that in. Now here's another trick. If I were to blow straight at this, it would be like driving straight into the wind with a sailboat. The sail would pretty much sit still because we're aiming right at the wind. What you have to do is you have to get just off of the wind coming at you to fill that sail, right? Of course, this isn't a sail. It should flop. But I'm going to hit 7 to get the top-down view. And this is aiming straight into the flag, which you can't see here. I got to rotate the wind just a little bit around. I'm going to hit R, hold down Shift so I get tiny little increments of movement. And then I'm going to move that wind right there. So now it's just off center, which is how we get it to affect that flag in a really elegant way. So if I do this again, I'm going to go back and tell it to play again. It's going to do almost nothing, but let's take a look. Option or Alt A. So with that wind going, that flag is nearly not affected at all. Now remember, the wind is going, but it is actually affecting the flag, but just barely affecting the flag. And that's for a couple reasons. I'm going to hit escape. The reason it affects the flag is because there's a little bit of wind, there's a little bit of energy coming out of this wind, but not a lot. So what we really need to do is we need to make the wind much stronger. So to do that, I'm going to go up with this selected, this fan here, or this wind. On the physics tab, it says the type is wind. The shape is like a plane sort of, so it's a surface kind of wind coming out of it. I'm going to just click into the strength, and I'm going to type like 500 and hit enter over on the number pad. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crank up the noise to full, so that's like a 10. And what that does is that creates sort of a variety as it's coming out of it, an unevenness, let's say, as it's coming out of this wind generator. If I zoom out too, you'll notice that it's probably hard to see because it's such a light blue, but there's because I hit 500, it puts those rings really far apart here, which means I can get a ton of wind blowing at this flag right now. So now we have a ton of wind blowing. Maybe this will help. So now I'm going to hit Option A again. And it definitely helps a little, but still not much. So one might ask, well, how is it that this wind, see there, it's a little more, right? We get a little bit of movement out of the flag. It's definitely pushing over a bit. How is it that the wind isn't moving it enough yet? Hit escape. The reason is because I'm going to right click on the flag. That selects it again. It's because there's too much mass to this flag and too stiff a structure sort of to it. So structure, I'm going to drop down to 5. And then the mass, I'm going to bring that down to like 0.015 and hit enter. Okay, everything else I think is fine. Let's see what that does. So we're basically making the flag really light. Up here there's also different things you could say. We'll make it, instead of it being like basic cloth, let's see what the setting is for silk. And silk says, well, it's a lot lighter, but see, I just want a little even more lighter than that, basically. So again, 0.015, enter. So now if I hit the wind again with an Alt A or an Option A, now we're going to see this flag as it goes. It's definitely drooping, but notice that now we're starting to get some waviness to that flag. And if you look up here, well, now we're seeing something that looks a lot more like what I showed you before. And if I blow too much harder, it's just going to be too uniform and flat out. Reminding you again that if I were to right click on the wind and go to the physics tab, I could increase the strength, I could change the seed. The seed works with a noise to sort of set, to kind of like go through a cycle of randomness on it. But as you can see here, we're almost at 250 frames. We're coming up on it pretty fast, and we will have sort of pre-built an animation for this flag, which, as you can see, it just wasn't too hard to do. So the next thing I'm going to do is, once we hit the end of this, we'll just kind of watch the flag wave. And if you're looking up in this corner here, you can see that's not bad. We're getting some good wavy winds. So I'm going to stop this real quick. And what I want to do is I want to adjust this. I want to bring the camera down and maybe tilt it on a little more of an angle, because I don't think we're getting quite the angle we mean to here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll select this camera. I'm going to hit rotate and just turn it a little. And then I'm going to grab this little blue thing that just brings it down the y-axis just a smidge. Maybe a little more. Okay. Remember, because this flag's going to droop a bit, right? I'm going to bring that back to the left a little too. That's pretty good. And then now let's see it again. So if I hit Option or Alt A, it shows the animation. Still want to bring this down just a little bit more because I think it feels like I'm about to fall off. I just need to stay more solidly on the flag so I'm not showing anything behind it. Maybe the answer is I need to come in a little tighter to the flag. To do that, in this window here, I'm going to hit 3. And then I'm just going to hit grab, since I have the camera already selected, G for grab, and then I'm going to just move in a little tighter. There we go. That way I know that my camera will never sort of reach outside the flag. So right now it's doing a good job, right? We have that animation. What if we just want to get a picture of this? Well, if I hit escape and I just move the cursor to a position that looks nice and wavy, like maybe I'm just kind of dragging a left mouse button over this. That's a pretty good one there. How about that? Well, let's see if we can get a couple rolls at the same time if we're lucky. Like right there, kind of maybe, or that's kind of interesting. There we go. How's that? So now if I go back to the camera view here and just hit render, down below, it's gonna use cycles. It's gonna take a little bit longer because it's got a lot more data to work through than when it was looking at just a white flag earlier before we added the textured image. But now we're getting an image that's desperately close to what we had going on in this photo. Now notice, here's something to take note of. This is sort of the last thing I want to show you. These lines are so smooth, aren't they? The way they're kind of reaching over and arching over in a very smooth way. And if I go back to Blender, you'll notice that, well, it's not very smooth, is it? And it almost looks like we're seeing a flag that was like micro folded with little polygons in it. That's no good. Well, that's for two reasons, really. I'm going to hit escape to stop this render. And the reason that that's going on, if I right click the flag again to select it, it's for two reasons. One, it's because the shading isn't set to smooth, it's set to flat. So I'm going to hit smooth. With this in that same position still, I'm going to hit render again. Let's take a look and see if it's any better. And what we're going to notice here is that a lot of the polygons are going to be gone because it's set to smooth. But we're still getting these like very harsh, boxy lines at the intersection of where there were polygons, right? Like right there, that's a really straight line and a really straight line and a really straight line. So how do we get rid of that? Again, it kind of looks like the way a flag might look if it had been sitting folded for a long time or something. But how do we get it to be a smoother edge there? I'm going to hit escape one more time. With the flag selected again, right mouse button. What I want to do is I want to add, let's go to the gear here, a modifier to the flag. It already has the cloth modifier. I want to go up here where it says add modifier and click that. And this time I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier. What subdivision surface does is it will, and I'm going to add a view of 2, meaning it's going to appear to subdivide that underlying grid that we subdivided like 12 times earlier 2 more times for every set of lines without actually adding any more surface area. It just appears that way. If you look up here, because of that, now we're getting some really smooth lines, We can up that even more if we want and just get some desperately smooth lines. But I find that like about 2 does a good job. So now if I go back to this and render again, now again, it's going to take a bit to render, but you'll notice that our lines are nice and smooth now. They don't have sort of that boxy edges. If you're seeing any texture in here, it's just from the shading of the image itself originally. And so now we're getting images that look desperately good. I mean, they're really starting to look like it's coming together, and we have a flag waving. Okay, this feels like a good place to stop. So in this video, we took a look at actually animating. We were able to capture a picture. In the next video, we'll go ahead and look at how to save out a video rendering of that animation. We're going to also do things like change the background color to like a chroma key green, so it will be easy to key the background out and use it as a transition. And then I'll show you how that kind of works out, and we'll finish up in Premiere. So see you in the next video.